Born in the bustling city of Tarsus, Saul entered the world into a family of means and influence. Tarsus, a prominent center of culture and trade in the Roman province of Cilicia, offered young Saul a unique environment in which he could grow intellectually and socially. From an early age, he was surrounded by wealth, learning, and opportunity, and his family ensured he received the finest education available. His upbringing was steeped in the rich traditions of Jewish faith and scholarship, and he quickly developed a mind both sharp and inquisitive. Saul's education did not stop at the borders of his native city. Demonstrating exceptional aptitude, he traveled to Jerusalem to study under the famed teacher Gamaliel, one of the most respected Pharisees of the time. There, Saul immersed himself in the strict interpretations of the Torah, learning not just the letter of the law, but the deep philosophical and spiritual meanings that underpinned it. Under Gamaliel's tutelage, Saul became a zealous Pharisee, and known for his meticulous adherence to the rules and his passionate defense of his faith. His rigorous training sharpened his intellect, disciplined his character, and ignited a fervent zeal that would define much of his early life. Multilingual and cosmopolitan, Saul could navigate diverse cultures with ease. Fluent in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, he moved seamlessly between worlds, both Jewish and Greco-Roman, giving him an extraordinary ability to understand, interpret, and influence a wide array of people. This combination of education, language skills, and cultural fluency would later play a pivotal role in his transformative journey and far-reaching influence. Yet, Saul's zeal was a double-edged sword. While it reflected his devotion to his faith, it also set him on a path of intolerance toward those he viewed as a threat to the traditions he held sacred. Early in his life, he became infamous for his persecution of the followers of Jesus, whom he considered heretics challenging the law he so deeply revered. His intensity, discipline, and unwavering belief in his mission made him a formidable figure, feared by many and respected by others for his unshakable dedication. Little did the world know that this young man from Tarsus, a scholar and zealot, was on the brink of a life-altering transformation that would change the course of history. Saul's journey from a staunch defender of tradition to a pioneering messenger of faith would become one of the most extraordinary stories ever recorded, a story of conviction, transformation, and relentless pursuit of purpose. If you are intrigued by stories of remarkable historical figures and their incredible journeys, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next chapter in Saul's astonishing life. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the incredible path of a man whose legacy would shape generations to come. As Saul's reputation as a devoted Pharisee grew, so too did his fervor for protecting the traditions and laws he had spent years mastering. His zeal, however, soon took a darker turn as he turned his attention to a new movement sweeping through Judea, the followers of Jesus of Nazareth, whose teachings challenged the very framework of the faith Saul had pledged his life to uphold. From the streets of Jerusalem to the outskirts of the city, whispers of this sect's gatherings reached him, igniting a fire of righteous indignation that would soon drive him to take drastic action. To Saul, these followers were not merely misguided. They were a threat, an affront to the law and to the order he believed was sacred, and he became determined to erase their influence entirely. The pivotal moment that cemented Saul's role as a relentless adversary of this fledgling movement came with the story of Stephen, a young and charismatic believer whose eloquence and courage had begun to draw large crowds. Stephen's words challenged the authorities, urging them to see beyond rigid interpretations of the law, and in doing so, he provoked outrage among the Pharisees. Saul, standing among the council, watched with unwavering conviction as the charges were brought against Stephen. And ultimately, as stones were hurled, approving the punishment with a stern resolve that left no room for hesitation. This act, which could have been the end of a single man, marked the beginning of a campaign that would follow Saul far beyond the streets of Jerusalem. It was not mere participation. It was an active declaration of intent, a sign to all that Saul would stop at nothing to protect what he considered sacred truth. Emboldened by his perceived duty, Saul did not confine his actions to Jerusalem alone. His ambitions carried him toward Damascus, a city that had become a sanctuary for believers seeking refuge from persecution, and where the movement continued to grow despite threats. Saul's determination was so intense that he sought official authority to arrest those who followed Jesus, intending to bring them back in chains to face judgment. His resolve was methodical, almost strategic, reflecting the same disciplined mind that had been honed under Gamaliel's careful guidance. He understood not only the people he pursued but also the systems he could manipulate, and he set out with a calculated precision that made his mission both feared and relentless. Every step of this journey was infused with the same intensity that had driven his early studies, yet it was now channeled toward confrontation. As he traveled, Saul's reputation preceded him. Stories of his previous actions and his unyielding adherence to the law caused many believers to hide, to whisper, to scatter, but they could not escape entirely. Wherever he went, the air seemed thick with tension, and those who witnessed his presence could sense the unstoppable force of his purpose. Yet, it was precisely this very pursuit, this relentless chasing of a path he believed righteous, that set the stage for a moment that would alter not only Saul's life, but the history of countless others. The contrast between his upbringing and his actions was stark. Born into privilege, educated among the finest minds, fluent in multiple languages, and steeped in cultural understanding, Saul had all the tools of insight, empathy, and diplomacy. Yet, in his pursuit of what he perceived as justice, he wielded these gifts with extraordinary focus against those he considered enemies, applying his intellect to track, confront, and eliminate a movement he could not yet comprehend fully. His journey to Damascus was not a simple mission. It was a crucible, a journey of conviction and confrontation that would test not only his physical endurance, but the very essence of his beliefs. Traveling through the deserts and cities between Jerusalem and Damascus, Saul encountered believers who, though frightened, did not falter in their faith. They spoke of compassion, forgiveness, and love in ways that clashed violently with the rigid structures Saul had internalized. Yet he initially dismissed these notions as dangerous delusions. His encounters with these early Christians, rather than softening his resolve, seemed to reinforce his certainty that his mission was divinely sanctioned. Every sermon he disrupted, every gathering he interrupted, and every arrest he sought to enact was a step further along a path he believed was predestined. A path that would soon demand a reckoning that neither he nor the world could have foreseen. The journey toward Damascus was not merely a pursuit of others. It was, in a profound way, a journey toward the limits of Saul's understanding, a test of the convictions that had shaped him since his earliest years in Tarsus and Jerusalem. As he moved closer to the city, the tension between his zeal and the reality of what he chased began to mount, creating a storm of anticipation that would culminate in a moment of unimaginable transformation. The relentless pursuit, the approval of Stephen's fate, and the planned arrests were not just historical footnotes, they were threads weaving a complex tapestry of faith, power, and destiny. Threads that would soon unravel in ways that no one could predict. Saul's story, though marked by acts of persecution and unyielding fervor, is a story of human intensity meeting divine circumstance, of a life poised between the known and the extraordinary, and of a man whose actions, however controversial, set the stage for one of history's most remarkable transformations. Saul's journey toward Damascus, driven by a fierce determination to suppress the followers of Jesus, had carried him through sun-scorched landscapes and bustling towns, each step bringing him closer to the city where he believed justice needed to be served. Yet, the closer he came, the heavier a certain tension seemed to press upon him, a weight not born of fatigue or travel, but of a presence he could neither see nor ignore. The midday sun beat down on him and his companions as they advanced along the road, and though he had anticipated confrontation with the believers awaiting him, nothing in his disciplined studies, nothing in his careful planning, could have prepared him for the extraordinary event that was about to unfold. Without warning, a light of unimaginable brilliance enveloped Saul, brighter than the harshest sun at its zenith, filling his vision to the point of obliteration. The road, the companions, the terrain all dissolved into a radiance that was both overwhelming and inescapable. He fell to the ground, disoriented, unsteady, and for the first time in his life, a sense of absolute vulnerability overtook him. His carefully constructed certainties, the clarity of his mission, the justification for his relentless pursuit, all were suspended in a moment of blinding illumination that left him completely powerless. And then, piercing through the luminous expanse, a voice, clear and commanding, resonated in his very being, a voice that was at once gentle and inescapably authoritative. "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" the voice asked, a question that struck to the core of his identity. In that instant, Saul felt the enormity of what he had done, the countless actions taken in what he believed was righteous zeal, suddenly reframed in a light he could not deny. Every approval of arrest, every sanctioned act of punishment, every step taken to suppress this growing movement now reverberated with a profound weight, as if each were measured against a scale of divine understanding far beyond his own. He realized, in that radiant and shattering moment, that he had been confronting not mere humans, but the very presence of God, and the consequences of his actions extended far beyond earthly law and order. Saul's senses were overwhelmed. The brilliance that enveloped him forced his eyes to close against its intensity. Yet even with his eyes shut, the vision of his own fervor and its impact pressed upon him with clarity. The voice, resonant and undeniable, repeated its question, echoing not as accusation alone but as revelation, prompting a reflection deeper than any scholarly debate, deeper than the disciplined rigor of years under Gamaliel. Here was a truth that could not be argued, a reality that transcended the laws and customs he had spent a lifetime mastering. And the shock of this recognition rendered him utterly blind. His companions, witnessing the sudden collapse, could scarcely comprehend what had occurred. Saul, the once unshakable Pharisee, now lay prone on the ground, incapable of even opening his eyes, enveloped in darkness while his mind reeled from the encounter. In the ensuing hours, as he remained incapacitated, the isolation of his temporary blindness forced Saul into reflection of a kind he had never experienced. He could no longer act, could no longer chase, could no longer assert authority over those he pursued. The silence and darkness became a crucible for thought, compelling him to confront the totality of his past actions, the zeal that had propelled him into violence, and the unexpected presence of a power greater than himself. Every memory of his approval of persecution, every moment of certainty that he was defending the law, now appeared in stark relief against the realization that he had been targeting the divine unknowingly. The contrast between his prior pride and the humility imposed upon him by circumstance could not have been more pronounced. As he lay there, helpless and alone on the road, Saul's mind wandered through the mosaic of his life, the scholarly hours in Tarsus, the rigorous training in Jerusalem, the mastery of languages and scripture, the disciplined devotion to the Pharisaic way. Each element that had shaped him seemed suddenly both crucial and inadequate. forming the foundation of a man confronted by something far beyond human comprehension. He realized that his understanding of justice and righteousness, however sincere, had been incomplete, framed only by the boundaries of what he could see and interpret. This encounter forced him to acknowledge the limitations of human judgment, the possibility that even the most zealous pursuit of law could be misaligned with a higher truth. Though the physical world around him remained unchanged, Saul's perception of reality had shifted irreversibly. In the silence of blindness, the light he could not see left a mark upon his soul, an imprint of a divine confrontation that demanded introspection, repentance, and ultimately transformation. The journey that had begun as a pursuit of authority and validation became, in an instant, a voyage of inner reckoning, as Saul grappled with the profound revelation that his actions, though executed in the name of duty, had unknowingly opposed the very source of divine wisdom. Each moment of reflection deepened the understanding that the life he had constructed, measured in knowledge and status, could be redirected, realigned, and repurposed toward a path that embraced humility, insight, and an awareness far beyond the narrow confines of previous ambition. As the sun began its descent and the intensity of the initial brilliance faded, Saul remained on the road, blind and still, yet internally transformed. The encounter had stripped him of his certainty, yet it had instilled a new awareness, one that would guide every thought and action thereafter. The silence of his blindness became a canvas for insight, and in this forced pause, the once relentless pursuer of believers began a journey that would redefine his understanding of purpose, conviction, and destiny, setting the stage for a transformation that would resonate across the generations to come. Saul remained in the enveloping darkness of his temporary blindness for 3 days, confined to his own thoughts and reflections, wrestling with the profound revelation that had shattered every certainty he had once held. His companions, bewildered and cautious, tended to him with quiet vigilance, unsure how to navigate the extraordinary event that had befallen the once zealous Pharisee. Word of his condition spread quietly through Damascus, reaching the ears of a devout believer named Ananias, a man of faith whose heart was guided by conviction and courage. For he had been entrusted with a task that would alter the course of history. Though aware of Saul's prior reputation as a relentless persecutor of Christians, Ananias did not hesitate, trusting in the higher purpose that had summoned him to this moment. And he set out to meet the man who had once embodied fear for the fledgling community of believers. When Ananias entered the room where Saul lay, the air was thick with tension, but it was also charged with the quiet electricity of anticipation, for this encounter was not merely physical, but spiritual, a convergence of past actions and future purpose. Stepping close, Ananias addressed Saul with a gentle authority that seemed to echo the same voice Saul had heard on the road, reminding him that he had been chosen for a mission far greater than personal ambition or zeal. "Brother Saul," Ananias said, "the Lord has sent me so that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Spirit. For the path ahead requires both vision and understanding, courage and compassion." Saul, still disoriented and grappling with the weight of his recent revelation, felt a tremor of hope mingle with apprehension. Recognizing that the moment demanded surrender to a process that was both mysterious and unavoidable, Ananias laid his hands upon Saul, and in that simple, profound gesture, the blinding light that had consumed Saul's vision on the road was reflected inward as a spiritual illumination. The darkness that had isolated Saul lifted in a manner both literal and metaphorical, restoring his sight and, simultaneously, his understanding of the world in which he now belonged. It was as if every shadow that had clouded his perception of truth was gently drawn away, leaving a clarity that surpassed the mere ability to see with the eyes. He looked upon Ananias not just as a man, but as an instrument of divine guidance. And he sensed the responsibility and urgency of the transformation that was unfolding within him. Through this act, Saul's past marked by fervent pursuit and persecution was acknowledged but no longer binding, and the trajectory of his life shifted irrevocably toward service, advocacy, and the dissemination of a message he had once sought to destroy. Following the restoration of his sight, Ananias guided Saul into the sacred waters of baptism, a ritual both symbolic and transformative, signifying not only the cleansing of past transgressions but the rebirth of purpose and conviction. As the water enveloped him, Saul experienced a profound sense of renewal, a spiritual affirmation that the path ahead would be guided by clarity, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to the principles he had once misunderstood. The baptism marked a tangible boundary between the man he had been and the man he was to become, embedding in him a deep awareness that true power lay not in coercion or fear, but in the capacity to inspire, to teach, and to bear witness to truths that transcended personal ambition. Each movement, each ritualistic gesture, carried with it the weight of intention, and Saul emerged from the waters transformed not only in form but in spirit, imbued with a sense of purpose that radiated outward and would touch countless lives in the years to come. Under Ananias' mentorship, Saul began to explore the dimensions of this newfound vision and understanding, delving into teachings that emphasized compassion, reconciliation, and the expansive reach of a faith that embraced rather than condemned. Conversations between the two men were filled with intensity and reflection, yet they were also suffused with patience and the unspoken recognition of the magnitude of the work ahead. Saul listened, questioned, and absorbed, slowly translating the raw, transformative energy of his Damascus experience into a coherent framework that could guide action, rhetoric, and personal conduct. Ananias, in turn, provided both instruction and affirmation, reinforcing that Saul's past zeal, once directed destructively, could now serve as a foundation for dedication, perseverance, and the articulate advocacy of beliefs that demanded both integrity and courage. As days turned into weeks, Saul's transformation became increasingly evident not only to himself but to those around him. His demeanor, once marked by severity and unyielding determination, softened into a presence that radiated conviction tempered by empathy. The physical restoration of his sight mirrored the moral and spiritual awakening that had been set in motion on the road to Damascus, and every interaction, every moment of reflection, reinforced the understanding that the path forward required humility, diligence, and unwavering commitment to a mission that transcended personal glory. The once feared persecutor began to speak, to teach, and to engage with communities of believers, articulating the lessons of his experience with clarity, passion, and an authority that came not from power or position, but from lived transformation and spiritual insight. Through this process, Saul became known not merely as a man who had changed, but as a living testament to the potential for redemption, the power of guidance, and the enduring impact of faith aligned with understanding. His journey from persecutor to preacher was neither instantaneous nor easy, but it was profoundly authentic, rooted in the tangible experience of enlightenment, restoration, and mentorship. Under Ananias' guidance, Saul's life assumed a new trajectory, one that would see him traverse cities, cultures, and communities, spreading a message forged in the crucible of personal reckoning and divine encounter, ultimately leaving a legacy that would endure far beyond the confines of his own time and place, illuminating the transformative potential inherent in the human spirit when guided by insight, compassion, and unwavering purpose. After his transformation and spiritual rebirth under Ananias' careful guidance, Paul once saw the relentless persecutor of Christians embarked on a journey that would take him across the expanse of the Roman world, a landscape of bustling cities, diverse cultures, and deeply entrenched traditions. The path ahead was neither straightforward nor without peril, for the very empire whose roads and ports he now traversed had long been indifferent, if not hostile, to the nascent movement he now championed. Yet Paul's resolve, tempered by his dramatic encounter on the road to Damascus and his baptismal renewal, imbued him with an unwavering commitment to the mission that had become the axis of his existence. Each city he entered offered both opportunity and challenge, from Antioch's lively marketplaces and forums, where philosophy and trade mingled in an intoxicating rhythm, to Corinth, a city of striking contrasts, where opulent villas sat alongside impoverished quarters, and where commerce and morality were constantly negotiating a delicate balance. In every city, Paul approached the streets, the temples, and the gathering places of the people with a combination of fervent conviction and strategic discernment, speaking not only to the hearts of those already sympathetic, but also confronting skepticism and entrenched belief with arguments rooted in both logic and testimony. He adapted his teachings to the rhythm of each locale, addressing the particular hopes, fears, and cultural norms of the citizens he sought to reach, weaving his message into the fabric of their daily lives. In Thessalonica, he found a population divided between the allure of civic pagan traditions and the promise of a transformative faith. And there, he patiently articulated the tenets of Christian belief, emphasizing love, unity, and ethical responsibility, while navigating the tension that arose from local authorities wary of disturbances to established order. Philippi, with its vibrant trade routes and strategic significance, presented a different challenge, requiring Paul to balance openness with caution, fostering relationships with local leaders and ordinary citizens alike, establishing spaces for communal worship and learning, and ensuring that the fledgling congregations he formed could sustain themselves in both faith and structure. Corinth, a city notorious for its cosmopolitan population and the blending of diverse religious practices, demanded that Paul exercise both courage and cultural intelligence. He often engaged in debates with scholars and local philosophers, not to assert dominance but to illuminate perspectives that had been previously unseen, drawing upon his own extensive education and his first-hand experiences of transformation to lend authenticity to his message. In Ephesus, with its monumental temples and thriving commercial networks, Paul found a city that both tested and amplified his missionary skills, as he navigated the tensions between local commerce, entrenched spiritual practices, and the radical principles he now carried. The challenges were manifold: resistance from established authorities, suspicion from citizens accustomed to traditional ways, and the ever-present risk of personal harm. Yet Paul's approach was marked by resilience and the subtlety of someone who understood that persuasion was as much about listening as it was about speaking, as much about empathy as conviction. Antioch served not only as a starting point but as a hub of connectivity, a city from which ideas could radiate across regions, allowing Paul to build networks of communication and support that would sustain his mission long after he departed. In each gathering, whether in a private home, a bustling forum, or a quiet corner of a marketplace, he nurtured a sense of community among believers, offering guidance, encouragement, and practical wisdom, while also preparing them to face social pressures and potential persecution. The churches he established were more than mere locations for worship. They became centers of moral education, social support, and spiritual growth, reflecting Paul's understanding that faith, to endure, must intersect with the lived realities of human life. Traveling from city to city, Paul relied on the roads and ports of the Roman Empire. Yet his journey was defined as much by encounters and relationships as by geography. He engaged with merchants, artisans, scholars, and ordinary citizens, forming bonds that transcended social and economic divides. Using storytelling, parables, and personal testimony to render abstract spiritual concepts accessible and meaningful. Every confrontation with resistance, every debate, every conversation contributed to a tapestry of experience that strengthened both his resolve and the communities he nurtured. Through these efforts, Paul transformed not only his own life, but also the spiritual landscapes of cities that had been indifferent or hostile to his message, leaving an enduring imprint on the social and religious consciousness of the Roman world. By the time Paul departed from each city, he had often left behind congregations capable of independent growth, composed of individuals who had internalized the principles he articulated and who could continue to teach, guide, and inspire others. His mission was never a solitary endeavor, though it required extraordinary personal courage and sacrifice. It was always relational, communal, and deeply responsive to the realities he encountered, traveling across Antioch, Corinth, Ephesus, Thessalonica, Philippi, and beyond. Paul wove a network of faith and learning that would ripple outward across time and geography, demonstrating that a life transformed through conviction and purpose could, in turn, transform the world it touched. In each city, in every gathering, and through every conversation, the narrative of Saul turned Paul unfolded, a story of redemption, vision, and relentless commitment to a cause that transcended personal ambition, becoming a testament to the enduring power of faith lived through action, dialogue, and unwavering devotion. The journeys that Paul embarked upon, stretching across the vast expanse of the Roman Empire, were never smooth nor devoid of peril. For the life of a messenger carrying a message that unsettled both hearts and authorities was inherently fraught with danger. From the moment he first set foot in cities like Antioch and Philippi, he confronted not only skepticism and resistance from those rooted in long-established traditions, but also physical threats that tested both his body and spirit. In Thessalonica, mobs incited by opponents of his teachings sought to disrupt the gatherings he nurtured, forcing Paul and his companions to navigate narrow streets under the watchful eyes of hostile citizens. Understanding that every word he spoke carried both the potential to inspire and to provoke, the precariousness of travel itself was a constant companion, with roads treacherous and prone to banditry, and ships that creaked under the weight of commerce and passengers alike, leaving no room for certainty or complacency. Shipwrecks became stark reminders of the vulnerability inherent in his mission. And yet even the fury of storms that threatened to dash his vessel upon rocky shores could not extinguish the fire within him. Tossed upon waves that seemed insurmountable, Paul's mind and heart remained anchored in the purpose that had driven him from Damascus. Recalling the blinding light that had redirected his path, the voice that had confronted his persecution, and the guidance of Ananias, whose hands had restored his sight and his faith. These moments of physical peril became crucibles in which his conviction was tempered. Each shipwreck, each perilous journey, revealed not only the fragility of human life, but the strength could be drawn from steadfast commitment to a higher calling. Even in the aftermath of such disasters, when the sea had claimed possessions and the body bore the strain of survival, Paul continued onward, undeterred, gathering believers, teaching in homes and synagogues, and building networks of faith that transcended geography. Imprisonment, too, was a recurrent reality in Paul's story. Yet the walls and chains that sought to confine him only seemed to amplify the reach of his message. In Philippi, he and Silas were confined in a dark, echoing cell after being falsely accused, their feet fastened in stocks. The night heavy with the sounds of distant city life and the murmurs of fellow prisoners. Yet, even in this place of apparent hopelessness, Paul's spirit was unbroken. He prayed, he sang, and he encouraged those around him, his faith a beacon that illuminated the darkness of the cell, demonstrating that resilience was not merely the capacity to endure suffering, but the ability to transform suffering into witness. The guards, the city officials, and the imprisoned were all drawn into a story greater than themselves. As the unwavering fortitude of a man devoted to a mission created ripples that could not be contained by stone or iron bars, hunger and deprivation, constant companions on long journeys and during periods of incarceration, were met not with despair but with steadfast reliance on the resources at hand. Patience, and an unwavering focus on the work that lay ahead, each day without sustenance, each night in uncertainty, became an exercise in discipline and reflection, shaping both character and mission. The beatings he endured were perhaps the most immediate, painful test of his resolve, yet Paul's response was never of vengeance or bitterness. Instead, he interpreted these trials through the lens of his broader purpose, understanding that suffering could become a conduit for empathy, credibility, and witness. Cities like Ephesus, Corinth, and Thessalonica all bore witness to the tangible cost of his commitment, as those opposed to his teachings sought to intimidate, humiliate, and silence him. Yet each assault strengthened his narrative, reinforcing the sincerity and depth of his conviction in the eyes of those who observed. To outsiders, these experiences might have suggested weakness or failure. Yet for they were proof that the work of spreading a transformative message was inseparable from the personal risks it entailed, even when his health was taxed. When the fatigue of travel and the demands of continuous teaching threatened to overwhelm him, he pressed on, balancing strategy with courage, discernment with compassion, and persistence with humility. Through all these trials, a pattern emerges not only of physical endurance, but of an inner resilience that reflects a profound alignment of purpose and action. The beatings, shipwrecks, imprisonment, and hunger were never endpoints but components of a journey that expanded the reach of his teachings, strengthened the communities he established, and set an example for those who would follow in his path. Each challenge became intertwined with the mission, shaping the narrative of a man whose life had been radically transformed, whose zeal had been redirected from persecution to preaching, and whose dedication inspired countless others to carry forward a vision that transcended immediate comfort and security. In this relentless pursuit, Paul demonstrated that true resilience is not the absence of hardship, but the ability to navigate hardship with unwavering commitment, turning trials into testimony, suffering into strength, and personal cost into communal gain, leaving an indelible mark upon the hearts and minds of those he encountered and the history of the faith he so fervently propagated. As we reach the culmination of Paul's extraordinary journey, we are reminded that his life stands as a profound testament to the transformative power of redemption, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring impact of unwavering purpose. From his early days in Tarsus, a young man steeped in privilege and education yet zealous in his persecution of those who followed the teachings of Christ, to the blinding encounter on the road to Damascus that forever altered his trajectory, Paul's story is a vivid portrait of how a single moment of divine intervention can ignite a life's calling and set a soul on a path that transcends fear, prejudice, and personal ambition. The very man who once sought to silence believers became one of the most influential messengers of faith, traveling vast distances across the Roman Empire, establishing communities of hope and belief, and leaving a legacy that continues to inspire countless generations. What makes Paul's journey particularly compelling is the interplay between human frailty and divine guidance, between trials that test the body and the spirit, and the choices that define character amidst adversity. He endured relentless persecution, shipwrecks that threatened to claim his life, beatings meant to silence him, hunger and deprivation that tested his resolve, and imprisonments that sought to contain him. Yet, in every instance, Paul's response was not of resignation or despair, but of courage and unwavering commitment to the purpose that had been set before him. Each hardship became a stepping stone, each moment of suffering a catalyst for growth, reflection, and deeper connection with the communities he nurtured. It was through this crucible of trials that his teachings gained authenticity. His compassion deepened, and his influence extended far beyond what any mere mortal could achieve alone. Paul's life also serves as a reminder of the profound possibility of transformation. He demonstrates that no past actions, no matter how misguided, need define the entirety of one's life. The man who once approved of Stephen's stoning, who sought to arrest early Christians with zeal and determination, found redemption in a moment of encounter with the divine. A moment that illuminated not only the error of his ways, but the potential for a life devoted to love, guidance, and service. Through the guidance of Ananias, the restoration of sight both literal and spiritual, and the embrace of a calling that transcended personal ambition, Paul exemplified that transformation is not an abstract concept, but a lived experience, a continuous journey of self-discovery, courage, and commitment to a higher purpose. His story encourages each of us to consider how moments of insight, encounters with truth, and acts of faith can redirect the trajectory of our own lives, turning regret into action, hesitation into courage, and mistakes into opportunities for growth. Furthermore, Paul's resilience highlights the power of enduring faith in the face of relentless opposition. Traveling from city to city across the Roman world, he faced not only hostile crowds but the constant logistical and physical challenges of travel, living among strangers, and sustaining communities spread across vast distances. He spoke boldly to kings and commoners alike, to learned scholars and the humble, bringing a message of hope, unity, and moral courage that transcended social, cultural, and geographic boundaries. In this relentless pursuit, he teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear or hardship, but the resolve to continue forward despite them, to act with integrity and compassion even when the world conspires against us, and to let purpose guide actions in a way that uplifts others and creates lasting impact. As we reflect on Paul's legacy, it is clear that his life is more than a historical account. It is a source of inspiration, a blueprint for turning obstacles into opportunities, and a powerful reminder that the human spirit is capable of profound change. His story invites us to embrace our own potential for transformation, to approach challenges with courage and steadfastness, and to recognize that the paths of adversity are often intertwined with the greatest opportunities for growth, influence, and contribution to the lives of others. Through his letters, his journeys, and his example, Paul leaves a timeless message that redemption is possible, that purpose gives life meaning, and that resilience coupled with faith can overcome even the most daunting of trials. Thank you for joining us in exploring the remarkable life of Paul, a man whose journey from persecution to preaching continues to resonate across centuries. If you found this story as inspiring as we did, please give this video a like. Share it with friends who appreciate tales of courage and transformation, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate the lives of extraordinary individuals who shaped history. Your support helps us continue to bring these compelling narratives to life, highlighting lessons of redemption, bravery, and unwavering dedication that remain relevant in our world today. Remember, every challenge we face can be a doorway to growth, every obstacle an opportunity to demonstrate purpose, and every story of courage a spark that can inspire change in our own lives. Join us in continuing this journey of discovery, reflection, and inspiration, and let Paul's life remind us all that transformation,